Commander Varnak stood at the center of the Zelvar Dominion's grand war table, his taloned fingers drumming against the illuminated control surface. Around him, the soft hum of analytical engines filled the chamber, generating holograms of star systems and planetary metrics. To his left, High Strategist Kelsith, cloaked in ceremonial red, adjusted her visor and narrowed her gaze at the spinning blue orb suspended in the air. The planet rotated slowly, shimmering with atmospheric patterns of clouds, oceans, and land masses. "This one," Varnak said with a flick of his wrist. "We strike here." Kelsith tilted her head, skeptical. "Designation T-92J? It's not even properly classified. No confirmed defenses, no spaceport grid, not even a formal welcome beacon. It's practically silent." "That's exactly why we take it," he replied, the corners of his jagged mouth lifting in a grin. "We've spent the last decade bleeding on the edges of Federation territory. We need a swift victory, something to stir morale and remind the galaxy who we are." Kelsith adjusted her visor again. "This planet hasn't been visited since the old Surveyor era. The logs are centuries out of date. There's no telling what might have developed since." Varnak waved his hand dismissively. "Enough. No more delays. I've seen enough resource charts to know it's rich. Oxygen-heavy atmosphere, vast biosphere, immense water content, and a gravity field stable enough to support long-term occupation. The perfect candidate for expansion." From the shadows near the back of the war room, Fleet Technician Jurtiel stepped forward. "Commander, the system is technically marked for caution by older galactic navigation systems. It's listed as a Class 5 biosphere, potentially unstable for standard colonization efforts. There's a notation unclear regarding species volatility." Varnak's grin sharpened. "Volatile? All the better. Let them scream when our ships descend from the sky. Let them tremble under the might of the Dominion." Kelsith hesitated. She had served under Varnak for nearly 2 decades. She'd seen him command with ruthless precision, but this decision, it felt rushed. Yet challenging his word now, especially in front of subordinates, would only cause unnecessary friction. She nodded stiffly and turned to the command panel. "Then I will begin fleet mobilization. Operation Obsidian Spear commences at once." 12 hours later, the Armada assembled above the twin moons of Zelvar Prime. Rows upon rows of sleek black warships glinted under the cold light of the system's dwarf star. Each ship bristled with plasma turrets, graviton cannons, and razor drones. Over 95,000 personnel had been briefed and deployed, all conditioned through decades of combat across a dozen systems. To them, this mission was routine. Another conquest, another forgotten world to bring under the banner of the Dominion. Varnak paced the command deck of the Talon of Vengeance, the flagship of the fleet. The bridge crew moved efficiently around him, their dark uniforms glistening with gold trims denoting rank and bloodline. Through the forward view pane, the target system grew larger. He could see the faint shimmer of the atmosphere now, the planet's hues unlike any other he had seen. Deep blues, soft greens, a pulsing light that seemed almost alive. He folded his arms across his chest and chuckled softly. "We'll land within 2 cycles, establish beachheads on each major continent, disable whatever primitive resistance they offer, and by the 4th cycle, I want a banner planted in their capital." If they even have one. Kelsith stood beside him, silent. As the fleet drew closer, the planetary AI Gnosis began a final, system-wide sweep. A wave of encoded scans pulsed through the orbital bands, analyzing emissions, temperature signatures, and atmospheric density. The data began flowing in. No orbital defenses detected, no incoming signals to challenge approach, and no identification transponder codes from local craft. The planet appeared docile, passive. "Strange," murmured Jurtiel over the comms. "There is noise, microwave chatter, pulse streams, erratic radio bursts. But it's unfocused, primitive, almost as if their technology operates independently without a central node." Kelsith narrowed her eyes. "Unstructured communication systems, or chaos," Jurtiel replied. "It's difficult to tell. We're compiling translations now." Varnak slammed his fist into the armrest. "Ignore it. Focus on planetary geography. I want units deployed to areas with temperate climate and dense infrastructure. We'll target the nerve centers, collapse their cohesion from the inside." The AI redirected its scans toward the surface, sweeping over massive landmasses dotted with flickering light patterns. It couldn't decipher intent, only activity. Cities teeming with movement. vehicles flowing like blood through veins of road. The volume of activity suggested billions of life forms, perhaps more. Gnosis flagged this with a cautionary ping, but no one paid attention. The fleet initiated atmospheric breach protocols. Heat shields deployed. Ship hulls adapted to pressure variants. As the first wave of assault cruisers cut into the stratosphere, flames licked at their sides, and the entire sky above the Pacific Ocean turned orange. The people of Earth looked up. Some pulled out smartphones and recorded the fireballs. Others called emergency services. A few amateur astronomers pointed lasers, trying to estimate descent angles. There was no warning from NASA, no explanation from national defense networks. The sensors had detected nothing until the last minute. These were not ICBMs. These were not meteors. These were something new. Varnak's voice echoed through the command channels. Let them watch. Let them fear. Soon they will kneel. The Earth's defense networks scrambled. Satellites tried to lock targets, but the enemy ships were moving too fast, too erratically. NORAD barely had time to alert key military bases before power fluctuations hit the upper atmosphere. Some cities experienced blackouts as electromagnetic surges rippled through the skies. Planes were rerouted. Chaos bloomed. The first landfall occurred near the eastern seaboard of the United States, followed by simultaneous strikes across Central Asia, Sub-Saharan Africa, and Western Europe. Sleek obsidian cylinders slammed into the ground like thunderbolts. From within, armored infantry emerged, tall and insectoid in silhouette, their limbs encased in kinetic armor, weapons primed. Varnak watched the footage from orbit, satisfied. He turned to Kelsith. This is the beginning of a new age. This planet, this Earth, will be the crown jewel of the Dominion. Kelsith hesitated again. Her visor flickered with incoming data. Earth. That word stood out. So simple, so familiar, yet something gnawed at her instincts. She tapped into the Galactic Index and quietly searched for Earth's record. A delay, then an access error. Entry restricted due to incident log. Sagan Protocol. Contact Galactic Union Archives for further data access. Kelsith frowned. Varnak was already walking away, issuing commands for the second wave. No one was ready for what Earth was about to show them. The talon of vengeance hovered silently in the upper thermosphere, cloaked beneath layers of particle-dispersing camouflage. Commander Varnak stood at the front of the command deck, arms behind his back, watching rows of tactical indicators flicker to life across the projection wall. Green flashes confirmed successful landings. Orange icons marked unverified contact zones. And then there were the red ones, zones of resistance, few but persistent. He narrowed his eyes, studying one near a coastal urban sprawl glowing in infrared. The terrain was dense with metallic structures and winding roads. Human response had already begun. Eastern Quadrant, Sector 3, he muttered. Send in a mech unit and clear a path. Fleet Technician Jertel relayed the command instantly. A mechanical rumble passed through the deck's structure as orbital hatches opened and atmospheric deployment rigs cycled into position. Massive dropships, bristling with heavy armor and reinforced treads, disengaged from the lower hulls of cruisers and descended toward the surface in silence. On Earth, the night sky shattered as alien dropships sliced through the clouds, casting wide shadows across cities and forests alike. Sirens screamed, civilians ran, fighter jets scrambled from remote bases trailing behind the unknown vessels trying to lock on with heat-seeking systems. But the ships did not follow predictable flight paths. They shifted erratically, using micro-boosters that sent them lurching sideways mid-descent, leaving most human pilots disoriented. Colonel Amanda Rourke didn't flinch as her F-22's targeting system blinked red and refused to engage. She'd seen combat before, but nothing like this. No signatures matched, no pre-launch alerts, just those dark things dropping like spears through the clouds. Her co-pilot barked a question, but she was already descending, eyes fixed on a trio of gliding black ships now nearing the industrial outskirts of the city. Whatever was inside, it would not be friendly. Meanwhile, far below, the first contact was made. In a rural farming district miles from the nearest military base, 4 Zelvar scouts deployed from a landed pod, moving swiftly across the open fields. Their armor shimmered with active camouflage, bending light into a barely perceptible distortion. They expected resistance from terrified villagers armed with crude weapons at best. Farming tools, perhaps projectile devices. What they found was something else entirely. A man, early 50s, stood in the middle of the field, holding a long-barreled rifle. His expression didn't shift when the scouts approached. He aimed. He fired. One Zelvar soldier staggered backward, a hole blown clean through the energy shield on his chest. The projectile had pierced both armor plates before shattering against his inner shell. The scout fell. The others retreated instinctively, not from fear but from confusion. The weapon wasn't alien, it wasn't advanced, it was primitive and devastating. Back aboard the Talon of Vengeance, the impact data came through. "Commander," Kelsith said, stepping beside him, "our ground units are reporting unexpected countermeasures. High-powered kinetic weapons. Inaccurate, but strong. And extremely numerous." Varnak raised an eyebrow. "Numerous?" "Civilian armament density exceeds projections by 400%. This species arms its population, not just its soldiers." He scoffed. "So what? They fight with rifles and hunting tools? We are the Dominion." Kelsith didn't answer. On the ground, in city centers, Zelvar tactical units found their progress stalling. Road systems were narrower than expected. Power lines obstructed their aerial deployment. Heat signatures were erratic. Humans didn't follow the standard resistance patterns seen in other planetary species. Instead of gathering into centralized military outposts, they scattered into pockets, individual fighters, neighborhood militias, entire families barricading buildings and taking positions on rooftops. Fires spread where fuel lines burst. Streetlights flickered and died as humans overloaded local grids to jam radio waves. In one urban alley, Lieutenant Bravith led a 6-soldier squad into a concrete canyon between buildings. His scanner detected life forms nearby, but he couldn't locate exact positions. He advanced, raising his plasma rifle. As his foot touched the base of a stairwell, a shape darted overhead. Gunfire erupted. Not plasma, bullets. 3 of his squad members dropped in the first 4 seconds. The 4th activated a shield, but a Molotov cocktail, a simple bottle of fuel and flame, landed on his back. Screams echoed through the narrow corridor. From a rooftop, a woman no older than 20 loaded her 3rd clip and whispered to the man next to her, "Did that thing scream?" He nodded, wide-eyed. "They scream and bleed." Across oceans, similar scenes played out. In the jungles of Southeast Asia, Zelvar scouts were swallowed whole by forests they couldn't scan properly. Their motion detectors failed against the insect cacophony. In the snowy peaks of Canada, insertion pods cracked apart on impact, crushed by sudden ice shifts caused by their own landing shockwaves. In the Australian outback, ground troops were greeted not by human resistance, but by a landscape that actively tried to kill them. Venomous creatures, burning sun, and isolation that corroded morale. From her observation bay aboard the command ship, Kelsith pulled up the tactical overview. Hundreds of red markers now dotted the map. More than 30 units had gone dark. Several larger landers had crashed. Human resistance was evolving, adapting. Already, some ground teams were reporting new enemy tactics. Road traps using cars, improvised explosives in sewer systems, ambushes coordinated over unknown radio frequencies. She stepped quietly toward Varnak. "Commander, we are not dealing with a pre-technological world. Their tactics are irregular, but effective. Their terrain is hostile and engineered, and their ability to coordinate, despite decentralized infrastructure, is disturbing." Varnak said nothing at first. He stared at a monitor that replayed a thermal scan of a suburban neighborhood. In the video, 5 Zelvar soldiers advanced through an intersection. No life signs showed, until suddenly rooftops lit up with human silhouettes, all armed. The soldiers vanished in a burst of heat and chaos. He turned to Kelsith, face grim. "We landed thinking we would conquer this world in hours. We didn't come prepared for a species that doesn't wait for orders to fight." She nodded. "We came looking for submission. Instead, we've woken something primal." Varnak paced to the front of the command deck. "Send the second wave. Focus on disabling their communication centers, military satellites, and power grids. I want silence across their major cities." Kelsith hesitated. "Sir, their infrastructure is not centralized. They operate on multiple redundant networks. Taking out one signal won't guarantee blackout." He clenched his fists. "Then we'll burn the cities to the ground." As the second wave launched from orbit, thousands of pods and cruisers descended once more. Earth groaned under the assault. But far from crumbling, its inhabitants began to rise. Men and women who had never seen war picked up weapons passed down by grandparents. Soldiers reactivated training they never thought they'd use again. Engineers redirected power lines. Firefighters became battlefield medics. Teenagers became scouts. Artists drew maps by hand and passed them between units. The invasion had triggered something ancient and terrifying. Humanity had been surprised, but not unprepared. Kelsith stood alone in the encryption chamber, her visor casting pale light against the polished obsidian walls. Around her, live feeds streamed in from over 100 fractured deployments across the planet's surface. Dozens of them cut out mid-transmission, some in bursts of static, others fading slowly, the last frame often an explosion, or worse, the contorted face of a fallen soldier. She muted the audio. The sounds, screams, foreign gunfire, the distant rumble of collapsing buildings had started to echo in her head. She had served the Dominion through 5 planetary campaigns, 2 sieges and a civil insurrection. She had seen resistance, uprisings, even suicidal planetary last stands, but nothing like this. Earth wasn't fighting for territory. It was fighting with the fury of something defending its very nature. A soft tone interrupted her thoughts. A direct feed from Ground Commander Raison blinked on the display. His segmented armor was scratched, scorched in places, and blood, bright violet, streaked one side of his faceplate. "Rajon, report," she said calmly. His voice cracked. "Sector 5 is lost. Human resistance overwhelmed our position within 3 hours. Tactical drones disabled by localized EMPs. Half my unit vaporized when we entered a train tunnel rigged with layered traps. They collapsed the ceiling behind us." Kelsith frowned. "How many survivors? 6 out of 40. Extraction?" Rajon hesitated. "Denied. We are cut off. The skies are no longer safe." Kelsith blinked. "What do you mean?" Raison turned his visor, showing the burning horizon behind him. "Their aerial units have adapted. Their missiles, though primitive, are being guided by mobile command centers we can't locate. They move constantly, using old civilian trucks and camouflage. Our ship was downed outside a city. Humans reached it before we could. They are reverse engineering our tech." She gripped the console tighter. "You must hold your ground until backup arrives. There is no ground left to hold." The feed cut. Kelsith stood motionless for a long moment, then exited the chamber. Outside, the main bridge pulsed with flickering alerts. Tactical officers worked with forced discipline, but beneath the surface she could feel the unraveling tension. The Dominion had never suffered this kind of attrition during an invasion, not at this scale, not this fast. She found Varnak in the central observatory staring down at the planet. He did not turn as she approached. "Our western flank has been compromised," she said. "Eastern deployments are requesting permission to abandon their objectives and regroup. The humans are coordinating more effectively than anticipated." He responded without emotion. "Cowards request regrouping, victors adapt." She stepped beside him. "Sir, we are losing commanders. Our casualties exceed 10% and rising. We underestimated this species. We must recalibrate our assumptions." He finally looked at her. "Then recalibrate. But we do not retreat." Before she could reply, an urgent ping echoed through the command systems. Technician Jurtil's voice came through the comms, shaky. "Commander, enemy strike groups have begun targeting orbit-to-surface relays. They found the transmission points. One of the towers on the Dagger of Dawn has been destroyed." Varnak snarled. "By what? A precision strike?" Jurtil's voice trembled. "No, Commander. A group of human soldiers boarded the tower. They climbed it manually and used explosive devices to rupture the base." Varnak spun toward the tactical map. "That's not possible. They should not have the means or capacity to penetrate Dominion defenses." Kelsith remained silent. A new alert buzzed. A transmission from orbital defense was coming through, unauthorized, human in origin, piggybacking on Dominion frequencies. A male voice, calm and unafraid, filled the command deck. To the invaders above. "You came here without warning, without reason. You looked down on us as if we were beasts. But you made one mistake. You assumed this planet belonged to you. It doesn't, and it never will." Jurtil cut the transmission, but the silence that followed was deafening. Varnak's eyes burned. "Send every available ship to that quadrant. Find the source of that transmission and incinerate it." Kelsith didn't argue. She returned to her station and activated long-range scanners. But a hollow feeling grew inside her. That message, it hadn't come from a general or even a politician. The voice belonged to someone civilian. A teacher, perhaps. A mechanic. It didn't matter. What mattered was how calm he had been. He hadn't threatened. He had stated a fact. That was what unsettled her most. Down below, in the shadow of a mountain range, Captain Sullivan crawled through the remains of his squad's transport vessel. The wreckage steamed from a recent hit. His left leg was broken, useless. Blood leaked down his side. He dragged himself behind the smoldering wreck, clutching a sidearm. Human voices echoed in the distance, laughing, not panicking. He didn't understand the language, but he understood the tone. They were relaxed, unafraid, confident. His hands trembled as he tried to activate his emergency beacon, but it only blinked a pale red, signal jammed. He looked up at the stars and saw a burning fragment fall from the sky. Above him, the Spear of Judgment had begun descent, one of the Dominion's most heavily armed vessels. Its target was a major industrial complex in the center of the continent. The crew was ready, cannons charged, engines flared, but as the ship entered the upper atmosphere, its navigation systems began to glitch. New signals appeared, ground-based, sporadic, coated with noise. Then something struck the starboard wing, not a missile, a jet. A human pilot had rammed his own aircraft into the ship's hull, detonating a payload. The explosion didn't destroy the ship, but it tore a breach large enough for pressure to drop and systems to cascade into failure. As the ship plummeted, spinning out of control, onboard officers screamed for control. The Dominion's flagship hit the ground outside a city and exploded in a shock wave that shattered windows for miles. Humans swarmed the wreck before the flames had died. Kelsith received the footage first. She watched the blurry drone images in silence. When she turned to Varnak, he was already watching too. The death of the Spear of Judgment had been seen from orbit. The crew of 200 officers, annihilated by a single pilot with a death wish. Kelsith stepped forward. We have to face the truth. This world is not what we thought. It is not simply hostile, it is contagious. This species infects its own kind with courage. Varnak's jaw clenched. Then we will be the cure. But she could see it in his posture, the first seed of doubt. He had underestimated Earth, underestimated the humans. And now they had taken their first ship, claimed their first victory, and shown the galaxy what happened when arrogance met resilience. Brannock stood in the center of the Dominion's war chamber, watching the simulation feed rotate slowly above the tactical podium. The holographic Earth flickered, its orbit surrounded by now familiar red notations. Lost pods, destroyed warships, darkened beacons. He had ordered silence across the room. No advisors, no technicians, no interruption. The last strike against the Spear of Judgment had wounded more than the Dominion's pride. It had cracked something inside him, something long untouched by defeat. The planet, deceptively beautiful in the hologram's glow, mocked him with every cycle of its rotation. He wanted to crush it, to burn it down to its core and salt its soil with the bones of those who had resisted. Yet no amount of fury had changed the tide. His precision strikes had failed. His ground commanders were dwindling. His fleet scattered. What disturbed him most wasn't the scale of the human response, but the pace. They were not merely defending, they were learning, evolving, accelerating. Kelsith entered without being summoned. Her rank afforded her that liberty, but even so, her steps were cautious. She held a data tablet in her hand, though she knew what it contained before reading a single word. He did not look at her. Speak. She hesitated only for a breath. We've lost contact with 4 more regional command outposts. The Western Archipelago garrisons were wiped out by an airborne assault coordinated entirely through civilian aircraft, modified crop dusters. His hands gripped the edge of the podium. How does a species so fractured organize this quickly? She moved to his side and activated the secondary display. Rows of intercepted transmissions appeared, texts, voice logs, video clips. They are not fractured. Their disunity is surface illusion. At the core, they possess a common instinct. It's not logic, not even survival. It's defiance. He turned slowly. Defiance is not a strategy. No, she agreed. But it is contagious. She tapped the screen again. A video began to play. Grainy footage from a helmet cam belonging to one of the Dominion's recon units. The scene showed a dark forest trail at night. The soldier moved forward, scanning for signs of heat or movement. Nothing appeared on his visor, yet 2 seconds later, the screen twisted violently before going black. Kelsith paused the video at the moment before contact. Hidden in the undergrowth, half covered in mud, a human man waited with a crude spear fashioned from broken rebar and duct tape. The angle of the attack had bypassed the sensor's line of sight entirely. She lowered the screen. "We are being hunted." Varnak stepped back from the podium, his expression, once carved from stone, now cracked with something unfamiliar. "Restraint. Give me a casualty report," he said. 17,000 and climbing," she answered. "The rate is exponential. Every failed strike teaches them something. Every soldier we lose arms them further. They are taking our weapons, our tech, modifying it within hours." He turned sharply. "Then we must use what they do not have." She frowned. "Meaning? Orbital-class incendiary payloads. Blanket a continent, scorch it clean, turn their progress to ash." Kelsith stiffened. "That would ignite the atmosphere in populated zones. It violates Dominion war protocols." His voice dropped into a cold whisper. "I do not care." Before she could reply, the chamber lights shifted red. An emergency signal flared across every screen. A breach, not on the planet, but inside the Talon of Vengeance. Varnak's head snapped up. "What is that?" Drutil's voice crackled through the command system. "Commander, human strike team aboard. Repeat, breach on deck 17, unknown method of entry. Internal auto turrets offline. We're locking down levels." Varnak barked, "Send all security units. Do not let a single one reach this deck." Kelsith was already moving toward the elevator. "I'm going down." He stepped in front of her. "You will remain here." She met his eyes. "If humans can infiltrate the Dominion's flagship, then your war is already lost. You need someone who understands improvisation, and that is not you." He did not stop her. The lower levels of the Talon of Vengeance were thick with emergency lighting and smoke. Sirens pulsed in low, guttural tones, and the corridor vents pumped out cooling gas to prevent electronic overheating. Kelsith moved with precision, her rifle at the ready. 2 Zelvar guards followed her, though she knew they wouldn't be enough if the breach was as deep as reported. She found the first body just outside the control hatch. Private Ensil, throat slashed, weapon missing. Nearby, one of the Dominion's energy cells had been pried open and rigged with rudimentary explosives, a timed loop using Dominion parts and human wiring. Kelsith disarmed it silently, her claws moving fast. "They are not just resisting," she whispered. "They're dissecting us." As she rounded the next corner, she caught movement. A figure, human, male, late 20s, in scavenged armor, darted through the next door. He did not fire. He moved like a scout, not a soldier. She followed. The hallway opened into a maintenance bay, half dark. She saw him crouched behind a turbine console, working quickly to attach another device. She leveled her weapon. "Stand down," she said. He froze, but only for a second. Then he looked at her, calm, focused, unshaken. His hands stayed on the wiring. She stepped closer. "You breached a warship of the Dominion. That should have been impossible." He didn't answer. She saw it in his eyes. He had already accepted death. He wasn't hoping for survival. He wasn't stalling. He was completing something. "Why?" she asked. He looked up and finally spoke. "Because you forgot what planet you landed on." Then he pressed the trigger. The explosion rocked the lower decks. Fire suppression engaged instantly, but the internal structural beams had been weakened. 3 bays collapsed, taking 2 power relays offline. Half the ship's shield systems went dark. Jurital confirmed the damage a moment later, breathless. "Kelsith's signal is down. Explosion in engineering. Structural loss confirmed. Emergency repairs underway." Varnak slammed his fist into the console. She disobeyed a direct order. "And now we are bleeding from within." His anger was raw, untethered. For the first time in his career, the illusion of control was slipping from his grasp. He had brought an entire armada to conquer a world he didn't understand. And now, the world was eating his army from the inside out. He turned to Jurtil. "Call back the outer fleets. I want every ship in orbit. We will form a perimeter around this planet. Nothing goes in, nothing comes out. We end this now." Jurtil hesitated. "Sir, if we redirect our ships, we will leave 2 other occupied systems exposed." Varnak stared him down. "Let them burn. Earth is the only front that matters now. Outside the ship, Earth glowed with clouds and storms, quiet in the void of space. But Varnak no longer saw beauty, only danger. He didn't need a report to know that the humans would strike again soon. They would find another way in, another system to break, another soldier to capture, interrogate, repurpose. And yet, even now, part of him still clung to the belief that dominance could be restored through fear. That if he simply escalated enough, broke enough bones, burned enough cities, the humans would finally yield. What he refused to accept was that they had never intended to yield in the first place. The silence in the command deck was absolute. Commander Varnak stood at the center, flanked by the last two operational strategists remaining aboard the Talon of Vengeance. His right shoulder was bound in reactive armor plating, hastily welded after a blast tore through the upper gallery. The injury beneath still throbbed, but he ignored it. The pain grounded him, reminded him that control, even now, remained possible. Necessary. He watched Earth spin below in steady rhythm, its surface clouded with firestorms and electromagnetic discharges. 3 cities burned, dozens more flickered with signs of blackout. He had ordered the destruction himself, issuing commands with a voice stripped of hesitation, yet instead of fear the humans responded with more ferocity, more defiance. His attempts at annihilation had only made them faster, more unpredictable, more dangerous. Kelsith was gone. Jertel had succumbed to internal wounds after the last breach. Of his original command council, only Officer Sarn remained, and even he had begun to avoid Varnak's gaze during briefings. The truth sat between them now, unspoken but heavy. The invasion had failed. Still, Varnak refused to utter the word. He turned toward the communications array and activated the Dominion's long-range broadcast node. It flickered, overburdened and cracked from internal sabotage, but the signal pushed through. A rotating code shield appeared, requesting clearance for a galactic transmission. He entered the override manually. "I am issuing a final warning," he said, his voice cold and clipped. "Earth is not to be touched. No fleets are to approach, no colonies are to form. This world is not a battlefield. It is a trap, disguised as a prize." Before he could close the channel, Officer Sarn's voice cut in. "Commander, there's a planetary broadcast coming through the emergency override frequency, Dominion-wide. I can't block it." Varnak's hands clenched. "Play it." The screens on every ship in orbit blinked at once. The human face that appeared was not a soldier, not a leader in uniform or an admiral in polished armor. He was older, dressed in civilian clothing, seated in a room dimly lit by candlelight and old photographs. Behind him a flag, tattered, hand-sewn, hung crooked on a cracked wall. Yet when he spoke, his voice carried like thunder. "You came here thinking we were weak. You didn't ask who we were. You didn't even check our name. You thought the blue and green meant peace, that the scattered signals meant confusion, that silence meant fear." He leaned closer. "You were wrong." The video cut to footage real, unaltered. Alien ships falling from the sky, human soldiers dragging wounded comrades through fire, grandmothers tossing Molotovs from balconies, children helping load supply trucks, engineers rewiring Dominion tech into battlefield traps, farmers turning irrigation systems into fuel bombs, miners collapsing tunnels beneath advancing legs of armored walkers. "You made a mistake," the man continued. "You thought this was just another world, but you forgot to ask who it belonged to. This planet has a name, Earth, and the people here are human. Write it down, carve it into your archives, burn it into every databank in your empire." He paused, "because the next time someone decides to knock on our door uninvited, they won't find survivors. They'll find teachers. And every one of us will teach the same lesson." The feed ended. Silence returned. Varnak stood still, his thoughts unspooling slowly inside his fractured mind. The humans had not merely defended their planet, they had rewritten the rules of engagement. The message had not been aimed at him, it had been aimed at the galaxy. He turned to Officer Sarn. "Initiate retreat protocol." Sarn's fingers hesitated over the console. Varnak exhaled sharply. "We no longer hold air superiority. Ground command is gone. Our fleet cannot resupply. If we remain, we die." The young officer nodded. "Yes, Commander." Escape procedures activated. The remaining ships broke formation, pulling away from Earth's gravitational pull with staggered jumps. The orbital zone emptied ship by ship, leaving behind trails of exhaust and a faint ring of debris. The humans did not pursue. No fighter jets chased, no missile batteries locked on. Earth had already won. In the command deck, Varnak remained motionless as the last atmosphere lock sealed and hyperspace drive initialized. The ship began to shake gently, preparing to make the jump. His thoughts turned inward. He remembered his first victories, campaigns waged on moons with glass rivers and fragile, poetic species that bent the knee before the first shot was fired. He had walked through cities of surrender, never questioned, always feared. But Earth had not surrendered, not even when his strongest fleets darkened its skies, not even when he dropped fire on its homes. Earth had done what no world had ever done before. It had rejected Dominion fear. Sarn stood at his console, awaiting final command. Varnak gave none. The hyperspace jump pulled the talon of vengeance from orbit with a thunderclap of energy. Earth shrank rapidly, disappearing into the blur of stars. No one aboard the ship spoke during the departure. There was nothing left to say. Hours later, in the stillness of the officer's chamber, Varnak sat alone. He pulled up the Dominion's planetary codex and began typing a new entry. Not as a declaration, not as propaganda, as truth. Earth. Classification, forbidden. Threat level, absolute. Status, undefeated. Advisory, engage under no circumstances. Host species known as humans, resilient, emotionally unpredictable, capable of rapid adaptive warfare. Note: initial contact resulted in catastrophic loss of Dominion fleet. Planetary resistance exceeded all projections. Do not provoke. Logged from intercepted message. Every one of us will teach the same lesson. He saved the entry. Far across the galaxy, where Dominion command centers glowed beneath skies of dust and electric storms, the report arrived. Officers read it with narrowed eyes, whispered among themselves, and erased Earth from conquest planning maps. Ships were rerouted, scouts recalled, recruitment messages edited. The planet's name spread quietly as a warning passed hand to hand in shadows. No longer a mystery, no longer an assumption. Just one word, Earth, and everyone knew what it meant.